Hi, this is Larry Bauer, Chief Executive Officer of the Family Medicine Education Consortium, and excited today to be talking with Dr. Jeff Heck, a family physician who is CEO of the Mountain Area Health Education Center, the largest, I believe, AHEC in the United States, taking care of the western portion of North Carolina. He's also Dean of a medical school campus. And I'll just stop there, Jeff, and I'm sure other things will come up as we move along the way. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
So Jeff, I want to take you back kind of down memory lane. Now, if I remember correctly, you grew up in Middletown, Ohio, which is where the book Hillbilly Elegy was based, or at least part of it was based.
Yes.
And so you come from, an interesting part of Ohio, which if people got to see the movie, they saw a little piece of that. But so how did you get started? How did you find your way to medical school?
Well, so in my upbringing, I fortunately had a mother who pushed us well, and we had to work hard, and I was motivated at an early age to do something that was both meaningful but also would keep me gainfully employed. And so I went to Vanderbilt from Ohio. I thought that was a pretty big step, and because the only means of transportation I had to get to and from Vanderbilt was hitchhiking, I got to know a lot of the country from crossing the Ohio River into Kentucky and Tennessee. So I learned a lot just by going back and forth to school.
Oh, and then from Vanderbilt, what happened next?
So I actually, probably like many family doctors in those days, I felt like I wasn't sure whether I could get into medical school or not. And I had two career choices. One was to be an agricultural scientist. And so I went to England my last year of college and studied agricultural science in Leeds, England. And then I got into medical school, fortunately in my home state and at the Medical College of Ohio in Toledo, which is now University of Toledo, which happened to be great fortune for me because two of the founding fathers of family medicine actually were active there. One was Harry Mayhew, who was a tremendous educator and leader in family medicine. And the other was Les Huffman, who was the president of the American Academy of Family Physicians.
And so what was it that led you to family medicine? As you entered medical school, were you thinking family? And in fact, what year was that, Jeff?
So I entered medical school in 1976.
So things were brand spanking new in family practice.
Right.
Did you come to medical school with that in mind, or did something happen along the way?
Well, I didn't have much experience with doctors at all because fortunately I'm healthy, but I knew pediatrics. That seemed like a good idea. But one of the things that really inspired me is that the most inspiring, mission-driven, community-minded, joyful physicians were family physicians. Those who were my teachers, my colleagues who had made the commitment to family medicine. It was actually not a hard choice for me. What was interesting is I think some of the brightest and the most motivated people in our class actually chose family medicine in those days. The bottom of the rung actually went to either orthopedics or urology.
Really?
Yes, they did.
So, okay, so you chose family practice, and then what happened with your residency?
So I did my residency in Dayton at St. Elizabeth's Hospital, which is no longer there, but it was a Catholic charity hospital. 750 beds. There were 12 residents in the class. And I'm very grateful to my education because they taught us to do everything from hospital, acute care, medicine, OB, some general surgery, to outpatient care. And again, another one of the wonderful founding fathers of family medicine was our program director, who was John Gillen, who was a great role model for all of us.
So I got to meet John Gillen when I came out here to Dayton, Ohio, and he was chair of the Department of Family Medicine, and just a wonderful human being. And he understood, what I like to say is he understood power. He understood how to respectfully use the power of being a family physician, and was able to build some things because of that. But I thought he was really critical
Mhm.
As
And,
an
and, a,
educator.
and a tremendous physician. He knew his stuff. He was one of those docs who never stopped reading, and he couldn't stand it if he got stumped. He was a great, great role model for us.
That residency program, unfortunately, is gone, but it had a history of a number of people who are now family physician leaders like yourself
Right,
training there.
right, right. And it had a strong sense of mission that was inculcated through the Catholic sisters, the Franciscan Sisters of the Poor, who ran the hospital well.
Cool. And then from there, what happened?
So after that, I had an arrangement in medical school for a partial loan repayment if I went back to a small town. And I interviewed in 10 small towns across Ohio. Um, and there were lots of appealing things about a lot of towns, but the people in Hicksville, Ohio were the ones who attracted us the most. I got married right before I started medical school. And so Kathy and I, when we went to Hicksville, we were so impressed with the people and their just how genuine they were. And honestly, we were never disappointed. In that town, I was in rural solo practice. In those days, it was, of course, all fee for service. We charged $12 a visit for an office visit, $5 plus $5 per suture for a wound repair. And so it was a very different era. No hospitalists, that hadn't been invented yet. No emergency medicine specialty. So knowing that I would probably be in the hospital a lot at night, we bought a house that was 3 doors down from the hospital and my office. And so I would not infrequently walk across the yard to the hospital, never get in. In fact, I would go days without ever getting in a car. And then I would see patients in the emergency room, deliver a baby. It was a wonderful community. I suspect it still is, but I loved working there.
I'm a little embarrassed being here in Ohio. I'm not a native, but I've been living here for a good long time. Where is Hicksville, Ohio?
So it is in the northwest corner of the state, fairly near Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Yep.
A farming community, flat as a pancake.
Yeah.
Fertile as all get out, lots of corn, soybeans. You just put a tomato seed in the ground and 60 days later, you got great big tomatoes.
Awesome. So how long were you there?
So we were there for 4.5 years. And at that time we had 3 small children, and I was getting out of bed a lot with them and getting out of a lot of bed at night. So I was, it was just a really hard practice style, being on call all the time. So at that point, as kind of a transition year, we went and I worked in a mission hospital in Kenya, where I was there for a year. And then following that year in Kenya, we moved back to Southern Ohio, to Cincinnati, where we had family that could help us with our children, who by that time became 5. kids. And I worked at the medical school for the University of Cincinnati, where I was there for 20 years. And my work there was I taught, I saw patients, and I started the global health program for the university, which was really quite a joy, taking students and residents to Honduras, to the poorest part of Honduras for many years, which I think we'll get into later.
Yes, yes. So as I recall, the University of Cincinnati, you had some great people there, Andy Felak, Jeff Sussman, and a number of others. And they had you had developed a really strong caring for the urban underserved tract, as I
Right,
recall.
right, right. We wanted to attract medical students to the residency program, where I was the residency program director for 10 years, but we wanted to attract students who were mission driven. And one way to suss that out is to create a global health track and a urban, an urban safety net track. So all of our residents either were interested in caring for the urban poor or caring for the rural poor in poor countries. So it was amazing the kind of people that we attracted there, who became really now are significant leaders in family medicine nationally.
Right. So tell me, I had the extreme pleasure to go down to one of those trips much later. You had developed things, and I had a chance to spend a week with you and to see what it was like up close and personal, so to speak. But when you first started, can you talk with me about what that was like? Here you are, a person from the quote first world, a physician, a person of means, and you're going into some of the most impoverished communities in Latin America. So what was that like, and what was your approach to your work there?
So I went initially with the idea that I wanted students to have the kind of experience that I had in Kenya, seeing what it means to be a physician in a community where there really were no doctors, where the need was very high. And so I went with the first couple of times with medical students and residents and a couple of colleagues from, this is in 1988, a couple of colleagues from University of Cincinnati, and we basically went wherever. I'm going to show you some pictures. So this is Ruth and Daniel Castro, who were friends from Honduras, who actually introduced us to all these communities. And so we'd go and see patients. But there was one community that really struck me. That's this one. This is what that says on there is welcome to Santa Lucia. This was a community in the western part of Intibucá, right on the border with El Salvador, considered by the World Health Organization as the Central American Poverty Corridor. It was about the size of Western North Carolina, with no real medical care. Santa Lucia had no doctor, had no formally trained nurse, no electricity, minimal running water. Actually, a lot of people in the rural area still just collected it from the creeks, and unfortunately had just also endured a border war with El Salvador. So it was a very impoverished community. And when we said that we were willing to come down to the community and see people and evaluate them and help where we could, they were extraordinarily welcoming. In fact, on one of my first trips there with Dr. Phil Diller, who is now the executive dean of the University of Cincinnati's College of Medicine. Phil and I were walking up in the mountains, and we were overwhelmed with what we were trying to do. I mean, neither one of us felt very confident in how we could be helpful, or whether we were even being helpful or not. And we stopped to talk to a man in a house with a mud roof, and with a straw roof and mud walls. He had a couple of kids there that were undressed, and he came out with 2 fresh oranges in his hands that were freshly cut and peeled. And he said, "Are you the doctors that came to help us?" We said, "Yes." And he said, "These are for you." These were clearly meant for his children, and they were quite a commodity. And Phil and I tried very hard to say no, until we then realized that he wanted to give something to us. He didn't want it to be a one-way relationship. And those were bittersweet oranges, because we realized that that maybe he was giving more than we were. And Phil and I, at the end of that trip, we sat down and we thought, what is the right approach to global health? Like, we're family doctors. We know something about patient care and community care. And we came up with lots of ideas, but one of the things we came up with was, whatever we do, if we create an organization, the name should be shoulder to shoulder. So we should be working side by side, shoulder to shoulder. It actually comes from an Old Testament scripture verse, which talks about 2 friends walking shoulder to shoulder, and how that is the right way to have a friendship. And we also decided, we developed a moniker for ourselves and for people who came with us, that the very first thing we needed to do in any community was put our hands in our pockets and our mouth shut and listen, which is such a hard thing to do when there's a power and wealth differential, when your primary motivation is to help. But in that kind of work, and in my mind, a lot of community work, that is the right posture to take. It's actually very difficult. But we established this wonderful relationship with this, with a committee. And the committee, this is a picture of the very first committee. It's a wonderful group of people who cared about their community just like we care about our community. And we asked them, we said, "What do you need?" And they said, "Well, we want to be partners with you." And we said, "Why don't we call ourselves hombro a hombro," which in Spanish is shoulder to shoulder. They said, "That's a good idea." And they said, "What?" We asked them, "What do you need?" They said, "Well, we need a clinic. We don't have any place where sick people can go. And, we have so many problems that occur. People get pneumonia, and people get, our children die, and, old people have nowhere to go for simple things like their blood pressure or diabetes." So it seemed like a daunting task, to be honest, but we decided that we would honor that first and foremost. So we bought a small piece of land in town, and we didn't have much money. We raised money from our friends and family to buy supplies and that sort of thing. So we asked them, could they help? And they said, "Absolutely. What would you like us to do?" So we said, "Could you just clear the foundation?" So it was a rocky hillside. It was not flat. And people in that town got out over a period of the next 6 months to a year and moved the foundation of that clinic stone by stone, by hand, with shovels, pickaxes, and then we raised money again from family and friends, and this is the clinic we built. This is I think it's the first picture I ever took of it. It's not actually completed. at that point. But it became the Clínica de Hombro a Hombro, and we hired a Honduran physician, and we actually started service there, and we had limited. There was some benefits of being relatively ignorant, relatively young, relatively poorly funded, because we actually worked together with the community to make this thing work. We couldn't come all that often. When we came, everything had to come in suitcases. And then the only way we could communicate from back to home in those early days was by telegraph. There was no landlines. Of course, there were no cell phones in the early 1990s. And so if we ever had a problem, all we had was telegraph. So I would leave my house with my 5 kids, my wife there, and I would say, "You're not going to hear from me. There's no way for me to communicate with you." And it was an interesting challenge, but the number of medical students, both Honduran and U.S. medical students, I calculated once, was over 4,000 that ultimately went back and forth to that community, and the 7 more communities that we interacted with and building clinics and over the years. And about it was about 10 years ago, well, longer than that, actually, about 15 years ago, I went from having to raise $1 million a year to not having to raise any money, because the World Bank, through the US government, had recognized our work there, and basically paid for the expenses to run the clinics that had become all Honduran providers, Honduran doctors, Honduran nurses. All of those clinics were run by Hondurans, and they ran their pharmacies, providing all the primary care, public health, emergency care, and maternity care for those 7 municipalities, again, about the size of Western North Carolina. And the World Bank funded that through a tax relief scheme with the Honduran government. So it didn't hurt to have another native Cincinnatian in a position of power. That was Mary Flores, who was the first lady in the 1990s. So this is another picture of Mary Flores is in the center. And then another colleague, Ed Zerwusty, and then 3 Honduran medical students. And we're standing in front of the clinic in Santa Lucia, and Mary Flores helped us with many of those contacts and arrangements in her position as First Lady, to allow that funding to change. So it was an amazing experience. It remains, those clinics are still operating.
So as I recall, Jeff, you had a requirement that when you went into a village with your hands in your pocket and your mouth closed, but you said instead of just the men being in charge, they had to have women in leadership roles. Could you speak a little bit about that?
So we did notice that that all the positions of leadership, including down into the grade schools, all those positions were men or boys. There weren't girls or women. It was particularly prominent in the schools. And having a couple of daughters, that rubbed me the wrong way, because I've got strong daughters, and I also felt like that was really an important thing. So we created this program for all the kids in the schools called Yo Puedo. And Yo Puedo can mean 2 different things in Spanish. It can mean I can, or I am able. It can mean either one. And what we did was we gave grants to the elementary schools, that would be kindergarten through 6th grade. And the grants enabled the schools to run projects that could be community service, or they could be small projects which would enable the schools through the children's work to make a little money. So the projects ranged from things like they sewed handbags to one of the schools operated a gas-powered refrigerator and sold cold drinks in their village. And there were a whole bunch of other things that were really fascinating. But the rules were that each of the Yo Puedo clubs would be organized, and the girls had to be the presidents of a girl had to be the president of the club. And when we first tried that, when we first mentioned that, one of the male principals said to me, he said, "That is impossible." He said, "Girls make terrible leaders, and they would be so reticent." He didn't use that word, but in essence, that was what he said, reticent to be leaders. That's just not going to happen. And we said, well, in order for this grant to come, that has to happen. Like if you don't want if you can't find a girl who can be the leader, then I'm afraid, you won't get the grant. And he said, well, he looked at me and said, well, we'll try. So, so we came back and did all the assessments 6 months later. And the one principal was the most remarkable one, because he was the most skeptical. And he said to me, he said in front of his whole community, this was at the ceremony, the Yo Puedo ceremony, where we sat for hours on end listening to speeches and looking at products. And, that principal said to his whole community, he said, when you first told me that girls had to lead this club, I thought you were crazy. He said, but now I realize that I was wrong, because the leader of this group, and he introduced the girl, he said, has been an incredible leader. And she has not only gotten the other girls involved, but she's got the boys involved. And it is remarkable what they accomplished. And I asked the question, I said, well, so she's the leader, what do the boys do? And this girl said, well, the boys, we asked them to go down and get things in the village to put in this refrigerator that we keep and sell goods. So they have to do all the carrying, but we manage the money. We sell the stuff. They just do the work that the mule does. And of course, they got a huge laugh out of the community. But I felt like it was that program, it was that Yo Puedo program, which actually changed the culture of a whole community. The fathers started believing in their daughters, and the girls started to have a vision for themselves that they could actually do more in their life. So it was a pretty rewarding experience to watch.
So I have to say, it was one of the great experiences of my life to spend that week with you. I forget the name of the village that you went into where you were just starting a new relationship, and you had a meeting with the elders. And we were in, I forget if it was a church, but they were all standing, and you asked them a series of questions if they would be willing to do various things. And the mayor of that town kind of facilitated the group response. And it was just impressive to see the kind of community engagement and the bonding that was happening that really was exemplary of shoulder to shoulder.
Well, it is very hard, you know, to be so different culturally, socioeconomically. There are many things that make that very challenging, but I don't think you can have enough humility to make that work. I mean, it has to be, you have to be aware, I think, under all circumstances, that if you're going to be helpful, you have to start seeing things in a different light. I remember another experience where, and I don't want to give you the impression I did everything right, because I didn't. I made plenty of mistakes. I had to. That kind of work is too hard. But I remember one instance where a friend of mine told me that he had access to an entire container worth of lightweight clothing that would be really beneficial for the communities that we worked in. He said, you know, I know I've seen some of your pictures, and it seems like the people really need better clothing, and I can give you this whole container, and I'll pay to ship it. You know, all you have to do is just distribute it. And if something just told me, like, you know, maybe I better think about this. And it was only a week later that I was in Honduras, and on that particular trip, I had walked up to a village that was only reachable by foot, and it was quite a hike. It was an hour and a half, and I was really tired at the end of it. And I wanted to go up there and talk to a midwife, because I was really interested to hear, like, what their experiences were and what kind of things they encountered and what things they needed, because, you know, we wanted to make sure they had adequate supplies and all that. It was a lay midwife. And when I got up to the village, to her house, I was exhausted, you know, so I sat down, I was drinking some water, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm beat. And I looked down the hill, and here came a guy up the same hill I had just walked up, with a bag over his shoulder that he looked like Santa Claus in 90-degree weather. He had this huge bag, and he was walking up that hill with a lot more stamina than I was without the bag. And he got up and he carefully put his bag down, and this midwife gave him a cup of water, and we sat down, and there was some small talk made over a little while. And then she signaled to him, and he opened up the bag, and it was clothing. He was a door-to-door clothing salesman, and he was selling clothes to all these little villages. And she looked around, and she picked out a pair of pants for one of her children and a little pair of shoes. And there was a t-shirt she picked out, and she paid him a small amount of money. And gratefully, he thanked her, and he bundled things up. He put it back on his shoulder, and further up the hill he went. And I thought to myself at that time, had I accepted that container worth of clothing, I would have destroyed his business. In the next 2 years, there would have been nobody bringing clothing. There would have been there wouldn't have been anything, because I wouldn't have had a container of clothing every year. And besides that, there were many of those people that were in the community that I didn't even know about. I never knew there was such a thing until that day. So my ignorance was a significant obstacle. I mean, I could have done harm,
Easily.
but I didn't. So I was grateful for that opportunity. I of course said no. We did not bring the container.
Right. So I'm going to move you forward back here to the States. You were at the University of Cincinnati when a lot of this was happening. We had you as a plenary speaker at our meeting, and you inspired a lot of people who learned about shoulder to shoulder, and you know, it got me motivated to learn more and to come visit with you. But then you moved away from Cincinnati, and what was next?
So I came to Western North Carolina, in Asheville, North Carolina, almost 17 years ago. And Western North Carolina is in our region, there's 16 counties. There's one tertiary hospital. There are 13 small hospitals, including 5 critical access hospitals. And I was motivated to be the department chair of family medicine for the AHEC, the Mountain Area Health Education Center, because I liked the work they were doing. It's pretty similar to what we were doing in Honduras. And you know, the work they were doing in Honduras was slowing down some because of the World Bank scheme. And I was tired of sleeping on concrete floors too. Anyway, so I started off as the department chair of family medicine. I then helped to get a branch campus established here in Asheville. And then 9 years ago, I became the chief operating or the chief executive officer for the organization, which you know, really very fortunately, my colleagues and I have been able to make it grow in those 9 years from about you know, 280 people and 3 residencies to 800 people, and now 10 residencies and fellowships, 3 family medicine programs, 2 are rural programs, a branch campus in medicine, pharmacy, public health, and dentistry, with great support from the General Assembly of North Carolina, who's helped to fund this development of the UNC Health Sciences at MAHEC, where we've been actively engaged in community work, especially in the opioid space and more recently in the COVID space. It has been a real honor to lead that organization, and I've got amazing colleagues. I feel like it's really shoulder to shoulder in the United States. And when people ask me, well, what is MAHEC? I tell them that if I have the short version, I say that we're a not-for-profit, but we're the people's organization. You know, we belong to Western North Carolina, and our job is to train the next generation of providers for Western North Carolina. And, you know, obviously most of those are going to be family physicians, because we need a lot of primary care physicians out in the rural areas, more than ever. So it's a great organization and a wonderful position to be in.
What's the connection? You're also the dean of a medical school campus?
So it's a branch campus. I'm an associate dean of the branch campus. So the University of North Carolina is the accrediting body, but they do their last 2 years here. So it's a branch campus model, a really great model. And we have utilized the longitudinal curriculum, which is a continuity of experience with both preceptors and with patients. I have to admit the person who runs it, who is the real dean, actually, Robin Latessa, she's a family doctor, and Robin has made an international reputation for herself as a leading expert in the longitudinal curriculum. She's written more papers on it. She has an incredible success at running a longitudinal curriculum, and many medical students from the University of North Carolina have chosen to be primary care physicians because of the campus, and particularly family doctors.
Great. I'm wondering, Jeff, one of the issues, I called it building pathways to the American dream. There are a lot of bright young people in rural communities, and they don't have, many are first generation to college, have that potential, but they don't really have the mentors, they don't have the support, they don't have, you know, the whole structure that kids have coming from families of means from urban areas. Has MAHEC had any experience reaching out to those kids, call it a pipeline program if you like, bringing them in?
Yes, we have. We have a program starting in high schools. We have, I think now it's 6 counties where we have high schools where we have health programs, health education programs, and they meet, I think they meet monthly, but they have mentors, they have experience working in the simulation lab. We encourage them, we give them as much information and knowledge about what are the various health professions to enter. And then with our, MAHAC has a close relationship with our 6 residential colleges and universities in Western North Carolina. 2 are public institutions and 4 are private, but we actually meet with them weekly, with the college presidents and chancellors, and we have internship programs for students, and again, we also have a medical minority mentoring program for underrepresented minorities in medical school, and we try to get as many people as we can from rural backgrounds and people of color to get into medical school or to pharmacy school, or because we need people from Western North Carolina to be going back to Western North Carolina as providers.
That's wonderful. Jeff, I'm gonna, I know we only have a little bit of time left, but I'd like you to reflect on what I would call the dreams of the founders. And you and I knew a bunch of the founders. You knew Robert Smith there at the University of Cincinnati. What an interesting guy. And a number of others. How do you see what you've done with your career lined up with what you think the founders might have had in mind when they created family medicine?
Well, it's really hard to talk about standing on their shoulders, because I think we really were given that opportunity. I mean, I think about myself alone, how many of the people who founded our specialty I knew or know personally, and how much they inspired me. My career has gone from, I've always seen patients, by the way, I still see patients now. But I have had the luxury of working in a small community. I've had the chance to work globally. I've had the chance to be in academic medicine. I've had the chance to be a leader. But one of the things that is really inspiring when I think about that group of people that actually started our specialty, one of the things they did, they made it possible for me to be successful. They created departments of family medicine. They worked hard to get resources from their medical schools. They got money and support from me to start a global health program. There's so many things that many of those leaders did to be helpful to me. So when I think about myself as a leader now, I feel like my job is to give all the tools and all the resources and things that those that are going to follow me, so that they have the opportunities to continue to grow and to make it really clear, because of our action, not our words, but that family medicine is the foundation for the American health system. If we want a really solid health system, regardless of whether it's taking care of infants or pregnant women or old people, or whether it's in a pandemic or a global opioid crisis, whatever the situation shall be, the foundation for all of that is best suited to be family medicine. And I feel like, give those who will follow me the opportunity to do that is a great privilege.
Well, one of the things that I'm hoping, Jeff, is that when people listen to this interview, when they listen to you talking, that it will continue to light the fires for them about what may be possible in a career as a family physician. And I do think I agree with you. We need a primary care driven system in the United States. And I think family physicians, not working alone, but working as the way family docs do, always a part of a team, building teams, building collaboration, shoulder to shoulder.
Right.
That's the way we get to something better in the United States.
Right. I totally agree. I agree. And we really did. I don't think that the mission or the vision is any different than it was back 50 years ago. I don't see that anything really significantly has changed. We still can build a health system based on trust and competency and empathetic, intelligent and thoughtful family physicians who live and work in the communities that they serve. And that is not any different than it has been for many, many years.
I would agree with you. So Jeff, I'm going to bring things to a close. Thank you so much for spending time with me. The other thing I want you to know, just yesterday, we had a 4-hour workshop on responding to the primary care workforce challenge. It's the 4th in a series, and we've got more planned in the coming 6-8 months. And we had a number of people talking about what they're doing to help kids from inner city communities and rural communities to get on a pathway to the American dream, so to speak. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you guys an invitation. I think people would like to hear about the model that you're developing, the things you're doing, and that would be great. What we're trying to do is build a community of successful, active projects in this area, because we need more people we need more of the right kind of people getting into medical school, dental school, nursing school, so that we get more of the right people coming out, going back, serving their communities.
Right. Boy, what great work. So glad you're still at it, Larry.
I can't give up till we're done. We got to have a primary care driven system.
Yeah. I just love that. I love your, I am so grateful for these last 2 conversations we've been able to have together. I always feel inspired after talking to you. So thank you for reconnecting.
Thank you. And I'm going to stay close. So we'll be talking some more.
All right. Thank you so much, Larry.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.